The Bad Guys is a pretty neat series. After a very large slump for DreamWorks defined by sequels ranging from disappointing to Trolls, The Bad Guys was a welcome success. It doesn't necessarily sit next to the animated masterpieces like Shrek 2, Prince of Egypt, Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon, or the later released Puss in Boots or Wild Robot, but I would put it against the more fun and functional DreamWorks movies like Over the Hedge, Penguins, or Captain Underpants. It was a refreshingly solid bundle of fun action, great animation, and its own unique art style, and emotional moments that, well, pretty basic, do exactly what they need to. It definitely has its weak spots, without a doubt, but for the most part, it's a movie that keeps its scope small and it passes its own bars with flying colors. And that can be a lot better than a movie that tries to be so much deeper than it can really stomach. And just like two of my favorite movies of all time, a sequel came out 3 years later, and while I wasn't hyped at first and I avoided any marketing for my own benefit, I did think The Bad Guys had significant room for improvement that a sequel could explore. Given the current state of the entertainment industry, I approach sequels, even to things I absolutely adore, like a rattlesnake. I wasn't excited for Across the Spider-Verse, Tears of the Kingdom, or Andor Season 2 at all, despite those being really, really good as far as sequels go. This could have been a Puss in Boots 2 scenario, or a Despicable Me 2 scenario. I had no clue. And after the fact, yeah, I like Bad Guys 2 a lot. It does a lot of things better than the original, but it also does a handful of things so much worse, and therefore I wouldn't say either is better than the other. The original is great, and while the sequel expands on a handful of aspects of it, some of which I didn't even think were possible, it drops the ball in a few places that put it on equal footing with the original, at least on a linear 10-point scale. If you really want to get into the pure subjectiveness of movies, then sorry, I didn't like Bad Guys 2 as much as Bad Guys 1, because where it fumbles is just where I'm most invested in cinema. Plenty of others don't feel this way, and that's okay. We just look for different things in movies, and being blessed with Asperger's syndrome, I just see the world differently. I'm not a critic, I'm just a guy who can talk for hours about Zootopia of all things. I'm not gonna be mad at you for liking something I don't, as long as you're consistent. Keep your Lord of the Rings trilogy, I'll just watch Secret of NIMH 3 times in the span of a week. But Bad Guys scratches my head in several ways, and its sequel beats my head with a baseball bat. So I'm gonna do what the internet was made for. Share dangerous propaganda that'll probably get the Patriots sent after me. This is The Bad Guys. I guess. Also spoiler. The Bad Guys is a pretty fun movie. I like it. Is it an absolute banger? I really think that depends on your mindset. DreamWorks is known to release a handful of movies that are definitely kids' movies, but also a lot of movies that definitely appeal to adults, including my favorite movie of all time. But this is a pretty solid children's movie. There are deeper elements to latch onto and appreciate, but nothing along the lines of imposter syndrome, foster parenthood, or literal mortality. It's a very basic movie, but that's not inherently a bad thing. I'd argue Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo are both very basic movies with very basic themes, but they're executed so well that they become some of the best in Pixar's lineup. The Bad Guys is literally just Despicable Me in concept. Its main conflict is a bunch of villains going good while trying to enact the greatest heist of their lives, but it's executed in such a unique way that it definitely stands on its own. For one, its animation is instantly eye-grabbing. Taking inspiration from the graphic novel series it's based on, The Bad Guys aims for a much more cartoony world mixed with cel-shaded lighting and 2D blending. Characters move in cartoony ways, and character designs are just fantastic. I don't know how DreamWorks made Bean Mouths kind of work when Pixar just can't. I think it's how 2D the faces look in comparison. This cartoony art style and animation add a lot to the humor of the world. A complaint I see a lot towards The Bad Guys is that it's never explained why there are these sapient animals, and nobody seems to point out this fact. That is not a mistake. That is a feature. This isn't like the Cars franchise where it seems like a major world-building flaw for the sake of merchandise. The world being so accepting of these sapient animals adds to the humor. They can disguise themselves poorly and fool literally anybody. The police chief can run alongside her own car. That's the joke. You explain any of that and the punchline is gone. It also really fits the heist elements of the movie. The movie takes a lot of vibes from Ocean's 11, as it should. Sam Rockwell is literally doing a George Clooney impression, and the crew plans heists throughout the course of the movie, but it definitely leans more into the loop on the third action mindset. It's not trying to be realistic. Disguises work more than they should. Technology works because it can. The police force is cartoony and crazy unrealistic, yet the stakes feel real. The effort the bad guys put into pulling off their heists feel real. You buy that webs can hack into a row of traffic lights, yet a firewall specifically designed against her takes a little bit more effort. Though an enhanced photo of the governor's eye unlocking a retinal scanner is pretty on the nose. The world isn't trying to be the most deep. It works enough for the action and characters, yet sticks to the cartoony logic of the world for humor. If you can't get past that aspect, I just can't recommend The Bad Guys to you. I don't think you'll like it. The movie's core identity rides on its buckethead insane humor. Without it, you've got characters that range from pretty functional to... we'll get to it. The 3 stars of the show are obviously Wolf, Snake, and Diane Foxington. Out of the 5 bad guys, Wolf and Snake get the most development and are clearly the ones with the deepest bond. Wolf is a nonchalant getaway driver and planner, while Snake is an old, rundown safecracker who hates everything good in the world. Being bad guys is all they care about. They never had the opportunity to be anything else, so they may as well play the cards they've been dealt. If that sounds familiar, it's literally Nick Wilde's character in Zootopia. In an effort to get out of jail, they pretend to take the opportunity to become good guys, but when Wolf starts acting a little too good, Snake feels betrayed by one of the only people in this world he could trust. And that's kind of because of Foxington. She portrays goodness as something Wolf actually wants. It does kind of make this a pals before gals conflict, but that's beside the point. Now, to be completely clear, I like Diane as a character. I just hate how she's used in the later portion of the movie, but that's for later. She approaches Wolf with such pure honesty in contrast with literally everyone else around him. Her able to catch him off guard in a couple of cases, letting his guard down and allowing the idea of being good to flow through him is very believable. And Snake not understanding that only makes sense. He's older, harder to change in his ways, and doesn't have that, drive like Wolf does. And it's not until he accidentally does good, like Wolf has been saying, that he actually sees that change as a good thing. And given how shocked he was when Wolf and the crew come back for him, he really didn't realize how much they weren't growing apart as much as he thought with this whole new element of their lives. Wolf and Snake's relationship is easily the highlight of the movie for those looking for deeper internal conflicts. The side characters are where things get a little more shaky. The standout character is the police chief. She's so dedicated to arresting the bad guys to a hilarious degree. It's basically the Zenigata of the movie. Excellent performance by Lois Griffin, hilarious animation, no complaints on her end. Shark is the expert disguise fish. While the other characters can hide amongst a crowd in a disguise, Shark can disguise himself as other people and fool them. It makes for some hilarious scenes and is probably the crew member with the highest good to bad joke ratio. Webbs is not one of Awkwafina's worst roles, really. Sometimes her voice just blends in with everyone else's and I kind of forget it's Awkwafina's. Not easy to say with something like anything else she's been in. Imagine if James Corden was in some animated movie, but he actually gave a decent performance. Webbs is fine. She's the hacker of the group and everything she does makes total sense in the context of the movie. She's probably the one with the fewest jokes in the movie, and she really doesn't have too much time to herself that does or doesn't work. She's passable. Piranha is the fart joke of the movie. Despite some really decent jokes and character animation, he has the largest amount of childish jokes that just don't work in the movie. Kind of a shame, because Anthony Ramos is having a blast in the recording booth, and when his jokes land, they really land. Thankfully, his writing is significantly better in the sequel, though not perfect. These characters don't get nearly as much focus as Snake or Wolf, which is kind of a double-edged sword. They're very restrained in what they show of themselves, which can be very nice, but their development amounts to, oh, I guess we can be good if we really try. Their arcs are literally just seeing that Wolf was right. Not the weakest part of the movie, but this isn't Puss in Boots where literally every character has something going on and executes it perfectly in such a tight runtime. I love that movie. Now, the thing with the bad guys is that for the first 2/3, maybe even 3/4, everything is fantastic. All praises to it. While it is simple, it doesn't do anything I have much of a problem with, and it clears all expectations for it amazingly. It's just that last portion when things take a massive cliff dive in quality. While I will say the stuff between Wolf and Snake works great, and this scene might be the best in the movie, the rest of this act is just a cluster of ideas that just bring this whole movie down. First and foremost is the twist villain, Professor Marmalade. It's not a great twist, and he's a pretty underwritten villain. His plan is basically impossible to see coming, even on rewatch, and his motivations just make no sense. But there is something I think is kind of accidentally brilliant about him. Hi, post-recording ZJ here. I think this entire section was just kind of the cinephile in me trying to latch on to something deeper in this movie that really was just not all too well thought out. It's kind of like trying to see the cinema in something that's honestly just really boring. Yeah, Marmalade is just not a good villain. He actually is just really underwritten. I did have a whole section on how his good acts are very different from the bad guys because he's in this kind of mansion thing. He's a philanthropist. He gets paid for doing good. And I did kind of want to go into a little bit on that, kind of compare it to like Tahani Al-Jamil from The Good Place, and like ask a few questions of how much good Marmalade actually really does, and like how his actions can kind of feel fake because they kind of reflect influencer like charity stuff, doing things for like views or votes. I'm not even gonna touch it. It's a very hot debate topic, and I'm honestly not prepared to go into it, especially considering how The Bad Guys 2 actually handles it very well. It actually handles like the incentive for doing good. It actually handles that decently. I'll cut in again when we get to that point. But yeah, Marmalade is just not a good villain. I was on to nothing saying he actually had something brilliant behind him. This was a really underwritten character. And then there's the other part of the final act. Diane is the notorious criminal, the Crimson Paw. Hear me out. I like the idea that Foxington had some kind of redemption and wasn't always the fox that got elected governor. But was this the only way? Diane being the Crimson Paw makes two huge problems. For one, it's a major deus ex machina. Wolf gives Diane the location of their hideout as an attempt to prove he's gone good, but at most he would hope that she would speak out for them, claiming foul play with the political power she has. But he had no way of knowing she was the Crimson Paw or had the capability to help them escape from Prison Island. It really feels like a cop-out. I guess you can call the fact that literally all animals in this world are bad guys to some degree. Sure. But Diane's contributions to the final acts just feel not unrealistic for this world, but more than anything else, thank goodness she showed up, I guess. And then there's the ending. I like the ending of this movie, except for one simple element. Diane is about to reveal herself as the Crimson Paw, but Wolf intervenes and surrenders himself and the bad guys to the police. I like this aspect. What I don't like is that Diane gets no repercussions for being the Crimson Paw. Despite stealing significantly more things than the bad guys, she gets no jail time or attention to her former crimes. You may say that's because she's the governor and has since done so much good. But Marmalade immediately gets arrested for her crimes, almost accidentally. And all I have to say is, thank goodness he's a criminal, because that'd be really messed up if he weren't. I'd say Marmalade's compound getting destroyed was a decent enough fallout for his actions. Either let it slip that he was the mastermind behind the heist, or just let it be. Diane getting by and Marmalade going to jail by accidentally framing himself as the Crimson Paw is just messed up morally, and it's probably the worst aspect of a movie about bad guys going good. So, that's the bad guys. Overall, it's probably like a 7. A solid B. I don't know, that last act really hurts it. Had the quality from the first half carried over to the second, this could have been easy 8, maybe 9 out of 10. Like I said, it doesn't need to be outstandingly unique or heavy, but it just needs to succeed at what it was aiming at. And that final act just really seemed to veer off course. Overall, some major room for improvements, but also expansion. And thus the sequel came out. I went into it completely blind, though with my worries. Typical sequel worries regarding repeating or undoing arcs, or just failing to justify its own existence. Neither of those happened though. As a matter of fact, it does a handful of things better. It tackles some deeper and heavier topics akin to the other DreamWorks sequels. It seems right up my alley, so why didn't I like it as much? It hurts, it really does, because this movie does so much right. Allow me to explain. Okay, so first and foremost, about 80 or 90% of this movie is fantastic. More so than Bad Guys 1. I do not think this movie is in any way bad. I just hate it. I hate it because it's so close to being absolutely phenomenal. Everything from a cinematic standpoint is just jaw-dropping. One big factor is the increase in the quality of the animation. I know, I didn't think it'd be possible. The animation was already great in Bad Guys 1, and was one of the aspects I felt didn't need improving upon. But my goodness, did they. We've got movements and set pieces that blow everything from the original out of the water. Masterful 2D blending and animation swaps, camera movements and framing is just raw and cinematic. One area it absolutely nails in comparison to the original is the lighting. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but it nails the sweet spot between being realistic, yet not making the characters feel out of place. From the bright sun of Cairo with contrasted shadows to the cloudy, dingy environment of LA reflecting just how much the bad guys' lives suck now. And then there's the darker and more hopeless moments that go really above and beyond, making scenes in similar areas in the original just feel redundant by comparison. Action-wise, these are some of the best scenes DreamWorks has produced as a studio. The flashback heist, the evading the police, the entire third act, my goodness. Everything that I would consider fun in this movie is absolutely better than the original. I will say there aren't as many heists in this one. Where some of my favorite scenes in the original revolved around the game trying to execute a plan, Ocean's 11 style, there's like 1 or 2 of those scenes in here, and the rest is pretty played by ear. Don't get me wrong, what is played by ear is amazing, but I kinda wish there was a little more planning and execution because of just how good the heists are in this movie. The wedding heist is probably my favorite across the 2 movies, and I kinda wanted a little bit more of it. Another point the sequel absolutely wins is the villains. The bad girls are significantly better villains than Marmalade, and it's not even a contest. They're all mirrors to Wolf in some way. In a time where the bad guys are trying to go good and the world hates them, the bad girls remind them why being bad was so appealing in the first place. The adrenaline, the community, the respect, the rebellion. Kitty especially says things that came straight from Wolf's mouth earlier in his life. Their plan, being to blackmail the bad guys with footage of Diane being the Crimson Paw, is airtight. Their motivation for this master heist works as a sense of spectacle as opposed to just more money.
Not about money, it's about sending a message.
I actually kind of hate it because Kitty literally says some things I wrote down in like a Google Doc earlier this year and writing a completely different villain. Now if that ever comes out, it's just gonna feel a little less original. Oh well. Outside of Kitty, the other two bad girls are fine. Buttersnot embodies the part of the bad guys that loves the companionship of being part of a gang. She's enjoyable enough. Susan is there to be Snake's love interest. Let's talk about that. Now, there are a handful of things in this movie that are very rough that I could forgive if a certain aspect of the movie was handled better, but it wasn't, so I'm going to complain. There's a weird change in the characters between movies. Obviously, they aren't bad guys anymore, but for the most part, all characters seem like themselves from the original. They don't feel like different characters or inconsistent with how they were portrayed in the original, and everything that's happened since, except Snake. Snake in the Bad Guys 2 feels like a different character. Where Snake was clearly the closest to Wolf in the first, he really feels no closer to him than any of the other three. They barely share any exclusive banter, not even in places where it seemed like he'd be the ultimate foil to what Wolf is going through. Instead, his entire character is to be lovey-dovey with Susan. Now, don't get me wrong, this can be really funny at times. I don't have a problem with Snake having a girlfriend on paper. It's really not a terrible way to take his character. He was by far the nastiest and most emotionally distant of the crew in the original, and seeing someone get under his skin and connect with him on a level he never thought possible is ripe with potential. We just don't see that. While we see Snake and Susan meeting over their shared taste for guinea pigs, I don't see Snake falling for her like he does. Susan should have to put in a lot more effort into getting under Snake's skin. It doesn't even need to be that much screen time. We just need to see Susan getting through Snake's walls in a way nobody, not even Wolf, could. And it still wouldn't fix the fact that Snake is really sidelined for where he could be the most vital in terms of internal conflict. This is really one of the hardest aspects of the movie to overlook. Snake is borderline unrecognizable from his portrayal in the original movie. As for the other side characters, they don't fare much better. My friend pointed out that the other three get a bit more to do this time around, and I initially disagreed. It really seems like everybody was just less important now. Shark uses fewer disguises, Webbs hacks less, and Piranha is there. But then he said that they help advance the plot much more than the original, and yeah, I can see that. I wouldn't say any of them have any more stakes in the plot than Wolf, but they do have much more agency as opposed to just going along with Wolf's plans. Webbs also gets a strange amount of character expansion. She's canonically the rookie of the group and loves weddings. It's cute, I appreciate it, even if it means so little in the grand scheme of things. Strange that neither Piranha nor Shark get any expansion like that. It really seemed like Webbs was going to be a pseudo main character for the first bit, kind of like Rocket in Guardians 3, but after that flashback, she's about as relevant as Shark. I will say the comedy in this movie hits way better than the first. While there are still some fart jokes, they're significantly fewer, and a lot fewer jokes that just feel immature or gross. There are a lot more jokes that just land. Strangely, with Piranha. Weird. The police chief, now the commissioner, is back, and while she was a standout character that was decently restrained in the first movie, she's just not in most of the movie, despite being a highlight whenever she is on screen. She's obviously skeptical of the bad guys like everyone else, but is happy to work with them when it seems like they're onto something. And then she just disappears. At the 30-minute mark, the bad guys are framed by the bad girls, and she sends the police force after them. Side note, in the theater, when I first saw this whole scene, all I could think of was, man, the Zootopia 2 team must be quaking in their boots. She then just disappears from the movie, and we don't really even see all that much of the police presence until the third act. When she shows back up, I thought, oh yeah, she is in this movie. She thinks the bad guys might be telling the truth because... Oh, that's just lazy writing. Similarly to Snake, she has a lot of potential and even shows off a lot of it, but she just gets shafted. But nothing she does goes against her grain from the original. Marmalade, oh my gosh, his presence in the movie is an absolute joke. Yeah, it's funny and goofy, but he has no reason to be here. He gives information to Diane, who tries to get it to Wolf, but not before they find it out on their own. And then he appears in the post-credit scene where he implies that he's an alien, creating an explanation for the animals in this world. You ruined the joke. The whole point of the Bad Guys 1 is that nobody cared that they were anthropomorphic animals, and explaining it with aliens is just... And then there's Wolf, which... Okay. Listen, I've been a little mean to this movie, and honestly, under normal circumstances, none of this stuff would bother me as much as it does. There are definitely weaknesses with the movie, but they wouldn't mean as much in the grand scheme of things if this movie just did what it was supposed to. A lot of my complaints are aimed at the side characters, but that shouldn't matter because this is primarily Wolf's movie. And outside of Snake's weird exclusion at some points, none of these characters should feel like they're taking away from his whole shtick. There's a version of this movie somewhere where all these criticisms still exist, but they're significantly more tolerable, and maybe the movie is a high 8, maybe 9 out of 10. So what happened? I guess it's more about what didn't happen. One of the main concerns I had going into the movie was what they were going to do with the bad guys as characters, because when your whole first movie is about a bad guy going good, where do you go? You have two options. You can go the Despicable Me route and attempt to apply these characters to hero work, which is... this can vary in quality. Or you can undo your main character's arc. This is riskier, as it doesn't make a sequel, it just makes the same movie again. This is a major no-no in writing, but it's not impossible to pull off. As a matter of fact, DreamWorks has done it before. It was called Shrek Forever After. Portraying the relapse as a midlife crisis works surprisingly well because Shrek's current life is good, but very overwhelming, and his desire to be an ogre again feels relatable. In The Bad Guys 2, Wolf does the one thing I hoped he wouldn't. He debates going back to villainy. And you know what? This was completely justified, and I was more than invested at this point, because the movie took its time to portray a good life as miserably as possible. After the adrenaline-fueled flashback, Wolf and the others spend the majority of the movie taking beat after beat. They can't get jobs, are framed for a crime they didn't commit, are blackmailed by the bad girls, and Wolf got friend-zoned by Diane. Life sucks for the bad guys. The animation and atmosphere help solidify this. The only real win the bad guys get for the majority of the movie is in the heist they're basically forced to do at gunpoint. And it works amazingly. You feel really good for them succeeding at this heist of all things. This, partnered with the influence of the bad girls, and yeah, Wolf wanting to go back to villainy, a life of respect, success, and joy is very believable, and an internal conflict that can hold some serious water. It all sets up a really depressing commentary on how we really don't have all that many incentives to be good in today's day and age. The criminal life can be appealing to a lot of people because it has a lot of things that being a law-abiding citizen just doesn't provide. This could have been an amazing arc for Wolf to go through, and then they just do nothing with it. No, they just drop it. By the next scene, Wolf's entire internal conflict is just wiped. He never brings up his desire to go bad again, and there's no believable resolution to his turmoil. He just has the resolution of an arc he was set up to go on, but never did. Nothing in the last act gets him to the place of knowing the difference between fear and respect. He's just there. When I say this movie is unfinished, they literally forgot a whole section of Wolf's arc. One that could have shown a realistic relapse after the incentives of the good life don't come to fruition. One that Wolf could have easily gone to Snake feeling conflicted about. You know, the guy who thought going good was impossible and a betrayal in the first movie. Instead, he's insistent that things are going to be better, and that's it? We never see Wolf click why he should be good when everything is going wrong for him. This is Wolf's movie, but his arc is just flat out unfinished, making it harder to excuse all the faults with the side characters when their sacrifices go towards something that doesn't come to fruition. And that's not even the worst part. What do you get when you combine shafted side characters with unfinished main character arcs and themes? You get Diane Foxington. She's not the worst part of the movie, but she's easily the most disappointing. Her role in the story is minimal to begin with. She's the one source of support for Wolf and the others to stay good and try and find a new life for themselves. Thankfully, she admits that she had it good in comparison to them due to nobody knowing about her crimes. Great, we acknowledge that the ending of the last movie was kind of messed up. Here's her cookie. And after the bad guys get framed, she goes to chat with Marmalade. Okay, this is a decent enough joke. I don't care anymore. And then the third act happens. It starts with probably my favorite scene in the movie. The bad guys failing to keep Diane's secret from leaking to the public. Because why would the bad guys succeed at a good thing? And all of a sudden, Diane's past, something she tried so hard to run from for so long, catches up to her. Now the world sees her as another bad guy. She finally has to deal with the consequences of her past actions because being good wasn't enough. This was the holy crap, they're going there moment I was exactly hoping for. This excited me to no end, and then, just like Wolf, nothing comes out of this. Diane disappears from the movie until the very end, and by then, no consequences come from such. Diane gets no repercussions for being the Crimson Paw. Could you imagine how powerful that would be if the one source of support the bad guys had gone to prison and had to admit she was wrong? If she had to say it's a lot harder than she thought and it really isn't fair, and she just can't encourage them to be good anymore? That'd be some Don Bluth level hopelessness. But it didn't happen. And it can't work now. because this movie has probably one of the worst endings I've ever seen. After an admittedly radical climax, the bad guys and Diane are all presumed dead. They get abducted to the Men in Black. It's an ad for whatever they do next. I hate this. This really sours the whole movie, because now Diane faces no punishments for her actions. These characters might be aliens now, and where everything was miserable before, things are all better because the Men in Black? There's no implication that they exist prior to this ending. They have no setup, and they exist to make the resolution for Wolf and Diane's character arcs non-existent and advertise whatever they do next. And I'm sorry, this is a concept I'm not crazy in love with. And it doesn't help that it feels like we got cheated out of a proper conclusion to the story for it. I hate it. It reeks of corporate intervention. It feels like the reason the last portion of this internal conflict gets hijacked and dropped. This movie should be just phenomenal. It should be amazing. Where the Bad Guys 1 was 3/4 great, the Bad Guys 2 is 90% fan-freaking-tastic, but that last 10% is just the keystone of it. The rest of the movie falls apart because it's just missing that last little bit. We have what should be a 9 out of 10 movie here, because there's really nothing the Bad Guys 2 does wrong. All of the movie's crimes lie in what it doesn't do as opposed to what it actually does. It's like if I made you a really, really good sandwich, better than Zupa's, but as you were about to take the last bite, I told you I didn't wash my hands before the fact. It really ruins everything, doesn't it? And so I can't say it's better than the original. And I have to admit, I don't like it as much, despite what it does so well. You're a real big heartbreaker, Bad Guys 2. Real big heartbreaker. And I guess that's that. The Bad Guys is a series that is plagued by single bad decisions that screw up everything. The first excels as a kids movie that can be enjoyed by anybody up until it isn't. The second aims to go above and beyond with higher stakes and deeper themes, but it's just unfinished. It's akin to a lot of things I like. Major potential, but really notable missteps. Neither of these movies mean as much to me as something like Puss in Boots, The Secret of NIMH, or even Zootopia, which I'd argue is an overall worse film, but they definitely have a ton of elements that should not go unnoticed. The original had a very fun atmosphere with character arcs that are actually complete, and the sequel had phenomenal animation and a great set of villains. I can only recommend them to very specific people with very specific tastes. If you're that guy who doesn't shut up about the Silence of the Lambs, yeah, I'm not going to drag you to the theater. I can't make you like this. But if you're intrigued by the pros of the movies and don't let the cons get to you as much as they did to me, I can't stop you. My best friend said that The Bad Guys 2 was in his top 10. I can't stop him. I think the Bad Guys movies are very good movies with major disappointments within them. Maybe that's my own fault. But it's been fun to return to video creation. I know it's been a while, and that's my bad. Things have happened, my goals have changed, and I've been really delving into other areas of creation that's had its own ups and downs. I'm hoping to explain at some point, but in short, I thought this channel was done for. I wasn't in a good place at the end of last year, and I needed a break from everything. A break that made it hard to come back. But I find I still have a lot of things to say about a lot of things, so I decided to give it another shot. Maybe this will be it. Maybe this is the last video essay I'll ever make, but I'm hoping to create some other videos by the end of the year. I'd love to go into some other movies, video games, and subjects in general. I've just had trouble with a mix of motivation, confidence, and technical problems. I did like Secret of the Mimic, I just couldn't record it because OBS does not play nicely with that game. Anyway, hopefully I'll figure something out, but for now, I'm done. That was Bad Guys, I guess.